Standards aren't suggestions because every time that you suggest a standard, you're inconsistent and you've set a new standard which may be lower than you expect.
Hey, it's Brad here. And before we get into the show, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Next Insurance. You know, this time of year, a lot of us contractors are looking back at the jobs we did, the good ones, the never again ones, and trying to tighten up things for the new year. And one thing that nobody likes thinking about is insurance until the day you wish you had it. A customer slips on a wet floor, a tool breaks right in the middle of a job, a supplier screws up, and you're left eating the cost. You can lose thousands overnight. And most folks only realize they need insurance when something already went sideways. That's why I really like what Next Insurance is doing. They've made business insurance so simple it almost feels wrong. You just answer a few quick questions online and boom, they tell you exactly what coverage your business needs and you're insured in minutes. No sitting on hold, no paperwork, no I'll get back to you nonsense. Next is built for builders, contractors, tradespeople, or anyone running their own shop. And policies start as low as $29 a month, and you can get your certificate of insurance instantly, which means no more waiting to start the job. End the year with some peace of mind and roll into 2026 knowing you're protected. Get covered in minutes at nextinsurance.com/hammer. Now let's get back to the show. Hey, welcome back to the show. Today I have another very special guest with me, Chris Hossfeld with Barrel Strength Leadership. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for having me.
Before we get into all the good topics and good stuff we're going to talk about, just give us a brief little interview, or I should say introduction about you, a 30,000-foot view, who you are, what you do, and we'll start with that.
So my name's Chris Hossfeld. I am the CEO and founder of Barrel Strength Leadership. I spent 27 years as an Army officer, as an infantry guy, plans, operations, that sort of stuff. I spent a couple of years teaching at the Army War College, teaching creative and critical thinking skills associated with thinking about a campaign over time. And I do experiential leading team building events as part of my company.
Awesome. Yeah, I was checking it out beforehand, your website, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but really interesting stuff. I like what you're doing there. And like I said, we'll get into that, but let's talk about leadership. And we're talking about how we can apply leadership to contractors and more specifically, military leadership and the experiences and how that can definitely translate over into contracting. So let's just start with a very broad question. When it comes to leadership, like what do you think most small businesses, most contractors get wrong in terms of leadership?
I think that most small businesses, to include myself, do it wrong, is you think you could do everything yourself and that you can do it better than anybody else. And I think that that's the essence of leadership, is it's getting the best out of the people around you, taking their strengths, mitigating their weaknesses, and being able to find a way to enable, encourage, and empower those around you.
And I think most people confuse leadership with management, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I own a business, I have employees, I have to, quote, manage them. And, by the definition of manager, yes, you are managing because you're their boss, but by no means is that leadership. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with it. There's formal leadership. I'm put in a position of authority and have responsibility. And then there's informal leaders, those that drive your organization without being told. People that look to them, peer leaders, those that welcome people into the organization better than you did. Those are leaders as well.
Yeah. And speaking with the military, with your experience in the military and, my experience in the Marines, obviously you've probably, and I have too, run across people in leadership that really shouldn't have been there or really you didn't have respect for because of things that they did. And that also applies to civilian, businesses as well. So, what do you think makes up a good leader? Like, what are some traits that make up a good leader and specifically in small businesses?
I think One, it's the two sides of vision and visualization. And I'm not talking about the visualization that you might think of, or where, I'm doing it and then it's going to, come to fruition. It's the visualization of how things are coming together that imparts with your vision of where the organization should go. And then I would say communication. How do you communicate with others? Relationships and trust.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think if you could only pick one of those, and I like to hear your thought too, if you could only pick one of those, to me, I think communication would be the biggest that you have to get right. What's your thoughts on that?
I think communication is critical because, as a military person, you might understand this. Message sent does not always equal message received, right?
Yes.
And so communication is that ability to send a message, have others receive it, communicate it back, and their ability to do the same to you, right? Communication, much like trust, it's a two-way street. If you aren't communicating well, others won't get it. If you're communicating well, sometimes you don't have to say very much, but what you say is very powerful.
Yeah, I think if you compare like regular infantry units to like a tier 1 operator unit, they work so well together, and there's so much trust and there's so much training that they can communicate with almost no communication, right? Like, I mean, they know how to think with each other versus more of a regular. There has to be some more communication. You don't have that level of trust. You don't have that level of training experience. And obviously translating that to a construction business, there's even less level of, you're not living with your employees. You're not eating, you're not living in 24/7 with them like you are in the military. And so it's even harder. And so therefore, I believe you have to have even more communication. Like, your communication skills have to be even better.
Yeah, I think part of the communication is communicating your expectations of those that work for you, right? Communicating the expectations that they might have of you, your expectations of yourself. I think that, communicating the expectations of yourself is very important. When are you going to check up on them? How are you going to check up on them? How are you going to ensure that the teams are working together? That's part of communication, right? That helps sets an organization up. And I think even your best crews can do things without communicating a lot. They're able, that when that person's moving on doing stuff, it's your time to move on to the next thing or your next part of the project, right? Those sorts of things can come because of the trust, but that only comes by communicating the expectations and how you can try to get through the tasks that are assigned to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good segue for talking about like the foundational principles, and things like standards, inspecting things, and discipline. Talk a little bit about those.
Standards and discipline don't necessarily mean that I'm a micromanager. I think that's a part that, especially today, can get lost. Why are you checking up on me? Why are you, in my business? No, it's about making sure that you achieve the standards that I have and the expectations that I have. And that if you're doing it, I don't have to check as often. I'm still going to check. And it's not because I don't trust you. I trust you, but I'm going to verify because inherently, as a leader, it's your reputation is in part my reputation as a company and as a business owner. So how do I ensure that all of that is in line in a way that our calling card as an organization is what we want it to be?
Yeah, you touched on it, but the trust but verify, statement of people are human. Like, you could be the best, at what you do, but that doesn't mean that you didn't make a mistake or you didn't have a bad day or you didn't get any sleep the night before. And so you're not, 100% attentive. Like, yes, we're not going to be there every second checking everything, and like all up in their business, but you still have to verify that things are being done to your standards.
Especially in the construction business, there's a reason you have inspectors at different stages, right? What you don't want and what they don't want is especially if you're bringing in a certain outside contracting or a certain other project person to be able to manage or conduct one part of it. Don't want to bring them back. That's costing time, that's costing money for both of you, right?
Absolutely. I remember early on, and I was building a deck, maybe I built a couple, but I didn't have a ton of experience. And so I was getting inspected. I was getting the framing inspection, and the inspector came out and he was like, "Hey, technically you're up to code. There's nothing wrong, but you might want to consider doing double joist, double rim joist to make it stronger." And he was giving me some advice, and I just hadn't thought about it, or I didn't know. And so that was helpful for me, not because I was trying to do it, as cheap as possible or cut corners. I just didn't know. And so that, as an inspector, he allowed me to in order to learn, to even make a better product, going forward. And I appreciated that.
Yeah, I think I mean, that's part of communication expectations and standards, but it's also about a learning environment. Can you teach while doing the inspection? I think that's a great example that we probably learned a little bit more in the military, right? There's the leadership by example. I did it, but then there's the leadership through, hey, yeah, that was good. Could we have done better? Sure. What could we have done better? Could we not? It's not about using less material, saving time, but it's about creating a better product. And I think a better product is the person, right? You think
Right.
the product is something physical because they want to come to you to accomplish whatever that task is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are the leader, right? That doesn't mean that you have to know everything. Like, you could have employees that know way more about stuff than you do, but they have to know that one, they can trust you, that you're not going to come back on them and, like, chew their butt out and why did you do this and that was stupid. But that, the leadership of, like, giving them the space of, I'm putting you in charge of this and I trust you to complete it. And then they appreciate that level of trust that you've given them as a leader.
Absolutely. Right? No one wants to be handheld through everything, I don't think. And having that ability to teach, right? But also, I think, recognize their subject matter expertise and how they can make you better builds a lot of trust and makes them want to work for you, or even better, work with you. Right?
I distinctly remember and when I was in the Marines, I had a captain, who was our platoon commander, and I just had a ton of respect for him. Like, he was just well-spoken. He was, he wasn't yelling and screaming at you all the time, telling you you're dumb, dummy and all this stuff. Like, I just had a lot of respect for him, and I would do anything that he asked of.
Right.
But at the same time, I had a platoon sergeant in the exact same unit that I had zero respect for because of things that he did and what he said and how he acted. And it was interesting, in the same unit, I had this contrast of leadership styles, and it was so blatantly obvious of the two that it made me appreciate, our captain who I respected very much. And it wasn't like we were doing different things, right? It was the exact same unit. It was just the way they went about, their leadership styles, even things they did personally that I didn't agree with. And so, like, all that stuff, applies directly to you as a leader when you're running people in a construction business.
Yeah, I think you just hit on a big part, especially in the military. You're not a leader from physical fitness to the end of the duty day. You are supposed to be a leader 24/7. And that's very different than what is seen in the civilian world. And I think that is part of what people really start gravitating to, is those that are consistent, right? That are consistent both on, off duty with what they do, how they do it, how they talk, how they treat others. We're all human. We all have bad days. We might go off. There might be a lot of stress. We might not have gotten enough sleep. But it's the consistency, I think, that makes it better. Okay, you can consistently be a stickler for details and discipline But if you communicated it well and you're consistent, you know how to act around that individual. You may not like it. You may find somebody else, the difference between that platoon sergeant and that captain. But the people will gravitate to those that are consistent rather than one that you don't know who you're going to get today.
Yeah, the thought that comes to mind is like, do what I say, not what I do. Where it's like, you need to be here, on time every day, but I'm going to show up 10 minutes late. And, that's just how it is. Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't translate.
It doesn't translate well for everyone to be on the job site at 6:30 and you come rolling in at 8:00 with, your big Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, whatever it is, and they're waiting around for you to tell them what to do, what needs to get accomplished for the day. And they're like, oh, I don't know how empowered I am to start the task that I know. I'd rather have that consistent person that comes in, tells me what, gets out there, comes back, checks. Okay, great. Awesome. We can work with that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I heard this recently, and I think it's a great illustration. It's like leadership can, there's two types of leadership. And if you can use the example of a string, right, you can either pull the string and the string will follow you, or you can try and push the string. I don't know about you, but if you've ever tried to push a string, it doesn't go anywhere. It just, bunches up. And so that's the two types of leadership, right? And to your point, I think, and I didn't really think about that. I mean, not consciously at least, but in the military, you are on 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
It is constant. There is no off, there is no 5:00 clock out. It is a constant, you have to be this person, a leader, all the time. There is no off days per se. And I think that is a huge benefit for, prior, veterans and stuff that are coming into the workforce. But more importantly, people that aren't in the military don't get to experience that level of leadership.
That's true, but they still admire it. I mean, you have the HBO series Band of Brothers,
Yep.
Widely popular, not only in the military, but out of the military. And I think it's because, one, history is very interesting, and it's a compelling story in the way that it's told, even in the book by Stephen Ambrose. The actors and the people in it, right? You start wanting to have a Winters around you, right? And it was, I think, the consistency of what he did on and off duty, how he carried himself, that drew people to him, and I think even in your world, right? What he does in the episode where they're taking out the artillery, right? He does that with a pickup team, but it's a pickup team of people he kind of knows and uses their best skills in the right way, in the right order, in the right sequence, right? It's 12 people against 90. A pickup team, but it's an all-star team because he knows how to best use them in the right positions. And I think that that's a great thing that people outside that we can use as an example of what we're trying to build when we're trying to create great teams to do whatever it is on behalf of our business or, even in our personal life.
Yeah, that's such a great illustration. I remember watching that series and like, man, I wish he was like, I would serve under him. Like I would have, really respected him and loved to serve under him. Another one that comes to mind is in Saving Private Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Hanks' character, there's all these rumors and stuff that go on, and then it turns out he was just a school teacher, right? Like he was playing the part because it was required, but really once you got to know him, he wasn't this person that they thought he was. And I think that's a great illustration of like, as a leader, you have to, I don't want to say be someone you're not, but if something's going wrong in your business, you have to kind of shield your employees from some of that. Right? Like you can't come in like, oh my gosh, the world's coming to an end and I don't know what I'm going to do, because your employees are going to be like, do I need to get a new job? Like what's going on here? Right. And so like the leadership idea of like, you have to always, and I don't want to say you have to always be on, but you have to portray this level of confidence and trust, I guess, is a way of saying it, that they can trust you that things are going to be okay, even if it's not.
Yeah. I think that, partly because of communication, authenticity as a leader, right, is an important aspect. And I think people in the civilian world, they really appreciate that out of the veteran population as they come out, right? When they see that, they gravitate to it. You may not be the expert, but they're willing to work with you or even teach you because you're consistent, you're authentic. They know what they're going to get from you. They know that you don't want to provide a substandard product because everything they're taught in the military is a substandard product will result in catastrophe, right?
Yep.
It's about critical decisions, high stakes, limited resources, often ambiguous information, but the outcomes are so high stakes. We don't necessarily have that in the civilian world, but in your world, in the construction world, it can be. If you don't do it right, electrical fires, plumbing issues that cause health, foundations that crack, and buildings that fall apart, not something anyone would want, right?
Yeah, no.
But it's hard to sometimes make that leap in understanding that difference between those that sometimes veteran community will get stuck on that transition or translation.
It's so easy when you're a small, mom and pop operation, if you're the owner, if you're still on the tools or if you got a few employees, it's so easy to be overwhelmed with daily tasks and things going on to want to cut corners. And I don't mean like on purpose, but as a result of not being able to just accomplish everything that needs to be done. And most of the time, those kind of things that we, quote, cut corners, like not getting an approval on a change order whenever something goes on, it's like, well, I don't want to stop working. I can't afford to pull off the job for 2 or 3 hours or a day until we get this approval on this change order. So we're just going to keep working. And then, hopefully in a day or two or a week, they'll approve the change order. And then you get to the end of the job and like, what's this? What's this $1,200 change order for? Well, that was for that thing. Well, I didn't approve that. Right. And so like all of that are casualties of this, you're overwhelmed. And so you kind of cut corners. And back to what you were saying, like in the military, you can't do that. Like you can't cut corners because the casualties are even greater. The stakes are even greater.
Right. I think that's really good, right? There's reason we have standards. We have, specific responses to, unique stimuli in the military, right? But it's the same thing. How much can people do in the absence of it? Okay, what can you work on? How have you prioritized your time, your tasks? Is everything dependent upon one decision today? If you don't communicate that to your crew, to your group, it's the same thing as, okay, guys, I just want you to go out there and find the bad guys. All right. For what reason? Okay. Am I doing it to overtly try and gain contact? Or am I trying to do it to understand where they're at? Two very different methods of approach to, the same overall outcome. And I think that's a hard thing to try to translate, especially when you're in a small business and you may only have a few people that are coming in and out. You're trying to find the best expertise. That may be difficult to try to do that. And so it kind of goes back to the first point. How do you communicate that with them can be a very powerful tool to getting what you want and need as the desired outcome.
You had sent over some information ahead of time. And one of the things that was here that I really like is that standards aren't suggestions, right? And I think, and I want you to answer on this, but before, like, if you have a standard in your business, but then you don't hold people accountable to that standard, then they're going to think, well, he doesn't really follow through. He doesn't even believe what he says. But talk a little bit about standards aren't suggestions.
Standards aren't suggestions from the military perspective, right? Because if you don't achieve that standard, someone could get hurt. You could lose an aircraft, right? Standards aren't suggestions because every time that you suggest a standard, you're inconsistent. And you've set a new standard which may be lower than you expect or that you want as an outcome. And so if you don't identify those standards early and communicate them often, there's going to be inconsistency in your product, in your people, in the way that you do things, your reputation. One person may go, oh, this is the best company ever because they didn't never talk to me. Well,
Yeah.
you're going to get what you asked for. That becomes a new standard.
Yeah, I think just as simple as like, hey, make sure you sweep up or clean make sure you clean up at the end of the day, clean up the job site at the end of the day. Like for one, it's not specific enough, right? Like clean up, what does that even mean? But then two, if you're not like, inspecting what you expect, like if you're not actually showing up to see what the cleanup looks like, then how do they know what is acceptable? How do they know what the standard is?
And then I would say your clients don't know what your standard is. Ooh,
Yeah.
how are we communicating to our clients by the standards we have for the job site cleanup? Because you never know. They may go, oh, it's 5:00. They probably kicked off. We can go by and we can kind of walk the property. We can see, the project. We can kind of make sure we're visualizing it. We just kind of want to get the feel of it, whether it's a house or, a new office space or whatever it is. And they go in there, beer cans all over the place. Oh, well, crap. Is that from the neighborhood kids or is that from the crew?
Yeah.
Were they drinking at the end of the day or were they drinking on the job? I don't know. Not saying the cleanup, but all of a sudden you have imparted inconsistency, right? And potentially they don't know what your standards are associated with your crew, the outcomes that you're expecting of them in the day, the projects, the final details. Okay. Am I going to have to check even more?
Yeah, I mean, that's the level of detail of things in the military, I think would blow most people's mind, like civilians' minds of like, how detailed certain things are. Especially like if you look at like, in the mechanic sector, air wing mechanics, like tools have plate. I mean, like there's so much details that have to be, standardized. It would make your head spin. But then you get into like the civilian world and there's like almost no standards in terms of like, processes, SOPs, how things are done. It's just like, hey, you got 10 years experience in construction. I need a carpenter, come work for me, start on Monday at this job and go to work. Like, and there's no standards. There's no, what I mean? Like, it's just, there's so much focus on doing the work. Like, are you capable of doing the work that there's almost no focus on the standards, and the processes and all that stuff?
Yes. And this is where I think, you're from a military background. If someone isn't meeting the standards or don't know the standards, do you teach them?
Or yell at them?
Do you provide them the tools, right? Or you fire them, right? But, okay, it's a person who's new on a crew and is trying to build up their resume and trying to develop the skills to go up through the ranks within their specific trade, right? It's kind of like that inspector. They knew because they probably had done it before, but they imparted the knowledge to you that helped raise your standards for completion of a deck, right? I think of that also, he built some trust with you, right? As an inspector, you're like, man, that's the inspector I want to come, because if I'm not doing something, yeah, he's going to not only tell me what I'm doing wrong, but he might tell me the right way to do it. So I'm doing it right the next time. Imagine if the air wing mechanic doesn't know a better way to do something, whether it's more efficient or unique to that block of aircraft, because they got only one, the basic aircraft to work on, right? That's going to be slightly different. Who's teaching them to achieve the standards that you want? And how do you empower them to do that? When do you want them to do that? What is so high risk that you want to be there during that to ensure that that standard is met that way? Versus what are you willing to accept a little bit of risk on that empowers the others to continue to better and develop themselves?
Yeah, that's sort
right. That kind of goes back to that leadership sort of philosophy.
That's so true. One of the things that really changed my thoughts on the leadership, specifically whenever guys make mistakes, and because it's easy when you're stressed out and you're everything's going wrong and a guy makes a mistake, it's easy to like want to blame them and put the blame on. The framework that really changed my mind and helped me is like, whenever someone makes a mistake on my team, my first question is, what did I do wrong? Me as a leader. Like, because was it a lack of training? Was it
Right.
a lack of standards? Did I just hire the wrong person for the wrong position? There's all of these things that I need to look at first and be like, what did I do wrong? And what can I do to change that? And maybe ultimately you just have to fire that person because of, whatever reason. But more times than not, I've found that it's something that I didn't do. I didn't set an expectation. I didn't communicate an outcome that I wanted. I didn't set the standard. I didn't have a process, whatever. Like, it's usually something that I did. And that framework really helped me to change the way I interacted with my team. Hey, just a quick time out from the show. If you're a frustrated contractor who's dealing with low profit margins, stuck working on the tools every day, or doing free estimates for people who are never going to hire you in the first place, I invite you to my private contractor community, the Profit Club, where contractors just like you are adding 2 to 3 times more profit each year without producing any more jobs, and finally getting completely off the tools to never do another free estimate again. So if you're ready to increase your profits, stop doing free estimates, and get off the tools, then all you have to do is click the link in the show notes to learn more about the Profit Club and see how it can easily 2 to 3 times the cash in your pocket, give you a proven sales process that will convert more jobs with ease and get you off the tools once and for all. And the best part is you can do all of this without having to produce more jobs than you currently are. Click the link to learn more. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, right. It's about a critical look at yourself. I think is very important, right? Did I have the right people, processes, and resources? Okay. What did I do to set those things up appropriately to achieve the outcome? Oh, maybe I shortchanged. Maybe I wasn't as clear as I thought. Maybe I was going in the wrong direction and I didn't take the feedback in the right place. Maybe I missed the feedback. My name is Chris, and I'm guilty of that on multiple occasions as a leader, right?
My wife would never say that.
Yeah.
She would never.
Right. I think that and I think being honest about that and holding yourself to those standards, people then go, wow, what is that? What is that guy? What is that gal? What are they doing different?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's that constant, self-improvement, like always trying to be a better leader, always investing in yourself, whether that's taking classes, reading a book, finding a mentor, whatever that might be. It's just, recognizing that just because you've been a carpenter for 10 years and you can build a house does not mean by default that you're a good leader, right? That leadership is a skill. You know this better than anyone. In the Marines, we teach leadership. They even have the acronym JJ did Tide Buckle, the 14 leadership principles. Like, all of that stuff is taught to you and ingrained in your brain. I still remember it 25 years later. Like, that's something you have to learn. Leadership is something you have to learn. You're not just born with it, and it just doesn't come because you have a lot of skill in a certain area.
And it's not really taught through experience in MBA schools, in trade schools, right? There's no 2-week portion dedicated to learning leadership principles and then putting them into practice. Nope. You spend an hour on it, you do a group project, right? And it's done. We in the military have spent weeks trying to ensure that our people have the tools and the opportunities to be able to not only develop it, rehearse it, experience it, and learn from it.
Yeah. I mean, there's no better scenario for leadership. I guess unless you were a CEO of a multi-million-dollar business, but you didn't get there because you didn't know anything about leadership, right? So, like, in the military, from a private all the way up to a general, like, it's just, you're learning learning about leadership, and it's everyday practical, experience that you're doing that with. So if you're listening to this and you've never been in the military, it doesn't mean you can't learn this stuff. You absolutely can learn it, but it has to be very intentional. You have to be very intentional about wanting to learn this stuff. And I think it's really important. I want to shift gears here for a second, because I want to talk about systems, but more importantly, I want to talk about, like, pre-planning operations. In the military, we have, big planning sessions on missions, mission stuff. In construction, it's a lot of times it's like, hey, we're starting a Smith job on Monday. Like that's the pre-planning that that goes into it. So speak a little bit about like pre-planning.
So, in the military, what we think about is the outcome that we want. Where do we want to be in relationship to people, terrain, our adversary, or in business, our competition, right? If you think about those sorts of things for every single project and then work yourself backwards or have a process to work backwards very quickly, right? I can imagine my mom was an interior designer, right? So she worked with architects, she worked with other companies, right? Had to think about, okay, what does the client want at the end? How do they want it to look? And then, okay, from there, okay, what are the things that have to happen? That might mean some structural changes. That might mean some other things that have to happen. All of that has to happen before we get to the paint color, what's inside. But if you don't have that vision, and that kind of goes back to my vision versus visualization, if you don't have that vision of what it's going to be when it's completed, you sometimes don't even know where to start.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've heard of the phrase, sometimes it's better to just start and then you'll figure it out along the way. And there's some truth in that depending on what you're doing. But if you don't have the end vision, like even if you start the project, then you don't know what decisions to make along the way to get there.
And if you have a process for thinking that, I think as a framework, then you can, with little information, do necessary tasks up front, right? I think about, and I'm going to do a quick military story. The very first time my company is in combat, we just received the area. It's us. We're in charge. And it starts with, you're going to conduct a raid tonight. Okay, where? I don't know where. So what can you do? What basic rehearsals? How can I? Okay, I can pull apart the task, a raid, and start assigning basic things that I know need to happen. And then people started rehearsals. And then as we got more information, they refined those rehearsals till the last minute when we got to the specific location. It's almost, I think, the same thing. Okay, we've got this. What can we don't have a whole lot of information. We may not even have all the tools to complete it. Okay, but is there a process for us to get there? Okay, these are the things that we can do up front. We can stake things out. We can identify lines. Oh, we can start building up the resources we need. Who's going to be hired? What's the sequence we need to do? What is the decisions that allow us to be able to say, this is the next stage of the project?
Yeah.
It's the same. We did that in the military. You can do that for projects or even building your team, even building your business.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I want people to take away is like there's a lot more pre-planning involved than what you may think there is if you want to have, a good outcome. And there's the 5 Ps or whatever. I think I added like 7, but prior planning prevents piss poor performance or whatever version of that you want to you want to use. But like you said, like there are knowns, like we know this to be true about this, and then there are some potential unknowns that we don't know. And how can we handle, there's only maybe so many unknowns, like it's not an unlimited amount of unknowns, but like, what do we do if this happens? What's our contingency plan? What's our backup contingency plan? Right? Like all in the military, we have those things. Like here's our fallback, here's this, here's our rally point, all these things that we have, because we all know, no plan survives first contact, right? The plan goes to crap most of the time. But you still have all of these things, the contingencies and stuff figured out ahead of time. So when you open up the wall and there's termite damage and now all of the framing has to be redone, you've already pre-planned that, or you've at least thought about it.
Right.
Like, how are we going to handle that? So like the amount of planning that goes into projects, and I see this a lot, and I experience it myself. Again, when you're overworked and you feel like you don't have enough time, the planning is the one that goes out the window,
Yep.
right? Like I don't have time to write a detailed scope of work for my team. I'll just tell them what to do when we show up on day one. And it's like if you would just spend an hour like really focusing on the planning of your project, it's probably going to save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, but also lots of headaches, and mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, so Einstein talked about if I only had 1 hour to plan on how to save the world, I would spend, it's like 50 or 55 minutes or 59 minutes thinking about how it needs to be accomplished, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about all of the steps, all the things, and then aligning the amount of time required in order to achieve that outcome. There's a reason in the military that you're supposed to take 1/3 of the time to think about for planning. Minimum. What do we, when things happen, you may only take 1/8 and you go after it. But that's only if you have so many good processes that allow you to be able to do step by step afterwards. But if you don't, if it's a new type of building, if it's a new type of plan, if it's a new type of architecture that, thing that you're trying to install that your team hasn't done before, you need to spend the time planning about what's going to go on, because those things that weren't addressed in planning in the military cost lives. In the civilian world, costs additional time, additional money, re-inspections, hiring a new person because you didn't think about what was going to be required. Oh, I didn't even think that I was going to need that expertise. And now I've got to go find them. Now I've got to wait for that person to come in, when you could have maybe sequenced it better or more efficiently.
Yeah, that happens a lot, especially when you're doing new things too.
Right.
Like when you're, something you've never done before and you're kind of branching out, which there's nothing wrong with that, but you're taking on a bigger project with elements that you've never done. And then you get in it like, oh, I didn't know I needed to have an expert, for this part of it. It's because you didn't spend any time thinking about it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's okay. What are the decisions we have to make along the way? If that's all you can do, and refine the decisions that need to be made throughout the course of the project, that helps you refine what information you need, what resources you might need available, and the criticality of the decisions. That lets people know, okay, when we get to here, we have to talk about this, because that's going to determine whether or not we need another person, another couple hours, another day, a whole new set of tools, whatever it may be, right? These are things, if you don't spend that time thinking about it. But most importantly, I think if you're not investing in the people to know what types of decisions and how you best receive the information, they may be shy, they may be late, they may not communicate it in a way that's understandable to you, and that takes time. Do you want texts? Do you want phone calls? Do you want a FaceTime so that they can show you what they're dealing with? How do you utilize the new technology to best understand where you are? I don't know what's right for every single one of those, but if I know what type of information I need in order to be able to make a decision, and I can communicate that, the entire team and the client. In the military, the client is our soldiers, our sailors, airmen, Marines, guardians. Invariably, you have a client that's paying for your services. Are you going to be worthy of their time and their valuable resources?
Yeah, there's so much that goes into it. I know we're getting a little short on time, but I do want to I want to end with, what we call AARs in the military, but what I typically call job costing. It's just, we did the job. Now let's talk about what happened on this job. And that's really where you get the majority of your, information, your feedback on what things in your business need to be fixed. Right. And I didn't do this for a long time. And I mean, I even knew about, we did in the military, but I didn't really apply it to my business. Cause again, I was too busy.
You didn't realize the power of it.
Didn't realize the power of it. And I was too busy. I'll use that word, too busy.
Yep.
But let's talk about that. Like AARs or, job costing after action reports, like the job's done. Now let's go back and debrief and look at it. Just talk about that for a second.
That's really what I do. I use what's called a staff ride, where you go and visit a battlefield, stand where Tom Hanks would have been in the Varaville draw on Normandy. I've been to Breakcourt Manor and talked about what's going. But what I think is the most powerful way to do an after-action review, right, is you only spend no more than 40% of the time on actually what happened.
Okay.
Everything else needs to be about the critical details. What could we have done better? And the creative, how would we or how could we do it better?
I like that. Yeah, 40% what happened, 60% how we got to fix it.
Because then it takes the blame away. It's okay, these things happen. There's a couple of things that we know we need to do better. We took too long. We took a couple of things. Why? And don't make it personal to make it professional. Okay, we had some people that didn't show up on time. Okay, that cost us some time, the ability to get the right people on the place. Oh, the reason I wasn't there is I didn't know. Is that a people problem? Is that a process problem? We had a good way of notifying people of what was needed. Oh, do we need a better WhatsApp channel, a Slack channel to let people know what's going on? The task for the day, is that something we could do? And now you get into the creative. Okay, well, how can we solve that problem? What do you think? Why would that be better? It may not be the best answer, but it may be the first step to getting to a better answer.
I think the most important thing you said there is that it has to be professional, not personal.
Yep.
You can't enter that conversation with blaming people. We're 20 hours over on man hours. What took you so long? That attacking of that, person. You can't do that. It has to be, we're in this together. We're all trying to figure it out. This is a safe space where we can talk about things. And, if I did something wrong as an owner, please tell me. Maybe I had an estimating error. Maybe I just didn't estimate enough hours, and that's on me, right? Like, I need to know this stuff so we can fix it.
Yeah. You may go, we went 20 man hours over. Okay, there's a couple of different things that could be. Either we didn't have the right number of people to get it done on time. Maybe I underestimated how long it could be. Maybe we just didn't have a good process. What do you guys think? Engage their critical thinking skills to help identify the problems. And they go, oh, man, okay, so if maybe I underestimated, but did we have this? Did you have the right tools on hand? It's not a blame thing, but it's about their preparation, their planning to be prepared. And then it's like, okay, well, maybe with a little bit more information, we actually probably could have only gone over by 5-10 hours. That would have cost us much. That wouldn't have cost us as much money. Okay, great. Let's use that on the next one. And then what's the best part? Assign accountability. Otherwise, it's just something we observed. It's not a lesson that we learned. I want you, that's a great idea. One, you give them some ownership. And two, okay, now I'm going to see if I can trust you to implement those changes that you think are better. And if it saved you time and money, how do you reward that on the backside?
Yeah. I like what you said too about ownership. And this is a whole different topic I don't want to get into, but like, if you do assign ownership of, responsibilities of things in the business, and then that responsibility is not done, it's very easy to go back to that person and be like, hey, this is your responsibility. What happened? Like, how, I got to hold you accountable, or I got to figure out, how to make it easier for you, or whatever it is. But if you're just like, everyone just does everything, and, it's just, we just show up and work. Like, well, how can you blame someone, or how can you hold them accountable? I shouldn't say blame, but how can you hold them accountable if no one was responsible for that task?
I think that's really two parts that I really try to emphasize when I do these staff rides and I do my leadership training events. Authorities and responsibilities. Okay. Who has the authority to do what? Work on certain things, to inspect, but who has the responsibility? Responsibility ultimately comes to you as the business owner. How much can you delegate? What do you delegate? Still, at the end, it's your bottom line. It's your reputation. It's your company. So ultimately, the responsibility still rests on you. But do you give those people that ownership through their authorities and their responsibilities and hold them accountable to the one or both of those. Because some people you may delegate authority to do things, other people you may delegate responsibility to. You may not delegate both to the same person.
Good point.
It all depends on the scale, the scope, the impact, your trust, your thoughts on risk. How much risk are you willing to take? And they won't know unless you communicate. It kind of goes back to our first point, where communication is such an important part of being a leader.
My wife haunts me with this quote that still sticks in my head. I used to come home from work every day frustrated and be like, man, the guys did this today and so did this. And, it's so stupid. Like, it's all common sense. Why couldn't, and she would say, yeah, but did you tell them? I'm like, I know I didn't tell them, dear. It's common sense. Like, they should know that they gotta fill up the gas tank. They ran out of gas on the highway. Like, they should know they gotta fill up the gas tank. That's common sense. But did you tell them?
And common sense is not so common.
No, it's not. I say this all the time. It's not about common sense. It's about common experience, right? And you can't interchange those two.
Are you making an assumption that all of the implied things that you want done are going to get done in the way that you want if you haven't communicated the standards? Who has the responsibility to do it, and who has the authority to do those checks?
Absolutely. And the thing that I already know, I mean, people hearing this for the first time, I already know what they're thinking. Yeah, but Brad, I don't want to micromanage them. I'm not, it's like, that's not micromanagement. Like, micromanagement is you showing up to the job site and saying, okay, go to the truck and grab your hammer. Now go over there and grab a 2x4 and a nail. Now start hammer. That's micromanaging. Telling them, you communicating them and telling them your expectations, the standards. That's not micromanagement. That's actually what you should be doing.
Right. And I think the difference between micromanagement and enforcing standards is kind of what you said, right? The micromanagement is, I will not allow you to do anything without coming back to me for approval.
Yep.
Of going on to the next step.
Yeah.
Okay, can I go get another board, boss? Is that really what you want? No. You want someone to know, okay, we've got to build this wall today to this standard.
Yeah. I mean, in the military, we have rules of engagement, right? That's a standard of, like, hey, we're not calling in, hey, sir, they're shooting at us. Can we shoot back yet? Do we have your permission to shoot back?
Right? And it's like, okay, the standard, this is a new way we're building this wall. I want to be there a little bit more, and I'm going to check a little bit more. Once you've gained that trust and you know that that's the standard and it's up to standard, I don't have to check anymore.
Yeah.
But we've all been there. We've had toxic bosses, absent bosses,
hypocritical,
the politically appointed boss because he's, the owner's son.
Oh,
okay?
Yeah.
You know what it's done to you as a subordinate, especially in the military. But how do you recognize that in your subordinates and to mitigate those things in the right way that still accomplishes tasks in the way you want them done?
Yeah. That's good stuff. I mean, we could spend all day.
We could go all day.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't even really cover everything that we could, but we definitely covered a lot about leadership and, setting standards and accountability and ownership. At the end of the day, it's like, as a leader, everything that happens under you is your responsibility. Whether it's a training problem or a communication problem or a resource problem, whatever it is, figure out what it is that needs to be done, and then empower your people to make sure it happens.
I think that is really powerful. And, the reasons I failed as a leader is generally because I failed to do that. The reasons I succeeded was because the time I took to invest in subordinates, right? And those leaders that invested in me, who helped train me, who helped me identify the best way that I can do these things. And am I passing that on? May not be right for everybody, but it's going to stick with somebody. And I think that's what's so great about leadership is it's not just in the military. People gravitate to leaders, whether it's in the informal or the formal leader, the shift leader or the person who is the resident expert that knows how to do it, but may still be somewhat junior on your team. He's still a leader. and how do we empower that person to be the best?
Absolutely. Yeah. Leadership goes so deep. I mean, there's so many, levels of it. There's so many different parts of it that you really got to, and it's really like a lifelong
It is.
journey, right? Like you're not just, oh, I took some classes and now I'm the best leader I can be. No, like it's going to take, and things change, right? As new generations come in, you have to learn new leadership styles.
I've been to some of these sites 100 times, and every time I learn something new, or someone asks me a question that forces me to be better. And that's awesome. I love that. I love trying to better myself, better my team, give a better experience.
I think that's the mark of a good leader, is that they welcome feedback. They welcome criticism. They welcome that. It's not, I don't want to hear, what I'm doing wrong. It's, please tell me when I'm doing wrong. Use a little bit of tact, but probably
Critique versus criticism.
Yeah.
Right? I think those are, one becomes slightly more personal, one is more professional.
Yeah. Well, since you brought up by going to the sites, share a little bit about your organization and exactly what you do.
Yeah. So generally what I do is I like to get people out of the classroom. In the military, in college, I hated the 1/100 or the 1/1000 PowerPoint briefings. I do better by learning by doing. And I think by doing or being in a place, it evokes emotion. And emotion really helps leadership sink in, right? It helps the learning. And so I try to bring people to incredible places or transport them through pictures, videos, a little bit of Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers if you can't go to Normandy. But I take people to Normandy and take them around, and we do that AAR style visit. Let's talk about what happened, but what can we learn from it? Do we have a bias? Do we not have good processes? Do I not know my team well enough in order to be able to pick up when there's crisis and multiple people call in sick? Do I have a good way of communicating my trust and what I think empowerment looks like, or how I accept risk? Let's do it by looking at a place where critical decisions, high stakes, limited resources, sometimes ambiguous information, but we know what happened. And then let's talk about, how did they get there? What can we learn from it? How can we be better? And that's what I do. And I do it in pretty cool places. Normandy, Gettysburg here in the United States, Vicksburg, Hawaii. Let's talk about Pearl Harbor, right? Market Garden, the Netherlands. And in fact, next week, I will be leaving to go do the Battle of the Bulge in Bastogne with the 101st Airborne Division, a unit that I got to command a battalion in, and walk them around the perimeter, go to different places. We're going to see the foxholes that you see in Band of Brothers. We're going to go to those foxholes. We're going to talk about it. We're going to go to the village of Foy, and we can connect those things that happened through the lens of things that we can do today to help project success in future situations. That's what barrel strength leadership is all about. We try to do it in an unfiltered. You want candid, you want open, and you want it in a way that is different, that's going to make you or your team better.
Do you only do this for like military units, or do you do it for anybody really?
I take colleges. I take people who are interested in leadership. I can take businesses. I could take your business or a group of contractors that want to talk about it, and let's go to Gettysburg. It's just outside of DC. It's much easier. And oh, by the way, I do everything minus the airfare, right? We'll go to the location. We'll talk about the things, and I will reinforce the things that you as a leader want your team to know, things that are important to you. How do we pull that out of them so that they learn it by doing, by seeing, without you? Because sometimes, well, the boss told us that this is important. It's far better when they go, man, if I only was able to do this, and you're like, that's awesome. I want you to do that.
Yeah.
Now they own it.
Yeah. You got to enable them and empower them too. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, it sounds fascinating. I would love to go to some of these places, and I mean, even to visit, but also, I love that you've incorporated the two, right? Like, here's something amazing that happened in history, and then let's turn it into a leadership training as well. I think that's a fantastic merge of two things. So yeah, kudos on that.
And it's fun. That's the most important part, is it's got to be fun. It's got to be engaging, which is the thing why I don't like the 1 over to 100 PowerPoint slide. Hey, leadership in the contracting world. Let me put up 5 bullets and then let's do a trust fall. It's not the same. Let's get out there. Let's walk. Okay, how might this be in your organization? Do you have these sorts of problems? Have you ever disagreed with a boss? How do you do it? How do you do it respectfully? When is it time to, you've heard this phrase in the military, shut up and color. Right?
Yep.
When is the point of discussion versus discontent?
Yeah. Yeah, those are all good things. Important things too. Chris, I always like to ask somebody this question, and that is, what's a book that you would recommend or one that you're reading?
Ooh. So one that General Gavin, he helped kind of create the airborne in the U.S. Army. He was one of the first battalion commanders. He commanded the first regimental jump into Sicily. He jumped into Italy. He became the assistant division commander for Normandy and the division commander by Holland. And he created a culture. And it's his little diary that indicates, you get little snippets of how he tried to reinforce what he thought made a good leader. And it's a war diary. And so there's gaps. And he goes back, well, it's been 17 days since I've been able to write anything down. But man, I'm proud of these people. I went around and I saw so-and-so. I trusted so-and-so to drag me around the battlefield. I think it's a pretty good, awesome experience. And because I served in the 82nd, I've had the opportunity to see the places and see things through his lens, as well as what he tried to build as a culture. And that culture still exists. His expectations of officers in the 82nd Airborne Division as an airborne officer still sit in those units today. And I want to peek at someone that has had that sort of lasting impact.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'll have to check that one out for sure. So awesome. Chris, good stuff. Like I said, we could talk all day about this. I really appreciate you being on the show. If somebody's interested in your service that you offer, what's the best way to find out or reach out to you?
The 2 best ways, LinkedIn, Barrel Strike Leadership. We're on there. I post different things. What am I thinking? What am I doing? Where am I going? Some of the history things with how I look on stuff. And barrelstrikeleadership.org. That's the website. You can see what I offer, mentorship, strategic planning, and these awesome, incredible, experiential and immersive leader development or team building events.
Awesome. Chris, thanks again for being on the show. It's fantastic. I appreciate all your knowledge and what you've shared with us, guys. Leadership is so important. Like, you have to take this serious if you ever want to really, one, like, get off the tools, but two, if you want to build an amazing team and build an amazing business, it's going to require leadership. So don't take this lightly. That's the end of the show. Thanks for hanging out with us. You know where to find us on socials. You can just search for the Hammer and Grind podcast. And remember, until next time, profit is not a dirty word.